Hello, everyone. Welcome to today's presentation. And our topic is internalizing the externalities. And our presentation comprises four parts. The first is introduction, the second, challenges, the third, solutions and cases, and the last, conclusion. And let me to give you the introduction. And what is the externality? It refers to the situation where actions and decisions of one person or group cause damage or benefit to another group or person. And there are many conflicts caused by the externalities in daily life, such as upstream pollution affecting downstream water use or the noise affecting the lives of the neighbors. This case could be solved by the taxation of property rights, which we learned in microeconomics. But these are not the main points of our presentation. We mainly talk about the measurement of the externalities, because if the value of the externality can be measured reasonably, we can specify appropriate tax policies or determine property values to establish compensation measures to solve externalities. And in previous G20 climate summits, representatives of various countries couldn't reach a consensus on carbon emissions. Why? Because countries are unable to reach a consensus on measurement of carbon emission rates. And here are the differences among the participating countries and also the problem to be solved. And the first is the lack of unity regarding the allocation scheme of carbon emission quotas. The second, lack of consensus on the measurement of carbon emission quotas. And the third, how should the value of each unit of carbon emissions be defined? And the last, in what way should countries that exceed their emissions quota compensate the other countries? And here are all of the introductions. Let my teammates to give you the discussion of the challenges part. Thank you.
Now let's talk about a crucial topic that affects us all, the challenges of internalizing the externalities of economic activities, particularly carbon emissions. This issue has become increasingly pressing as the negative impacts of market failures, such as climate change, inequality, and health risks, become more evident and urgent. One of the main challenges of internalizing externalities is the complexity of identifying and measuring them. Externalities are the costs or benefits of an economic activity that are not reflected in the price of goods and services. They can be difficult to quantify and evaluate, particularly in terms of their long-term and indirect effects on society and the environment. For example, the health impacts of air pollution from industrial activities or the social costs of income inequality are not easily measured or attributed to specific actors. Another challenge of internalizing externalities is the difficulty of assigning a monetary value to them. Market-based mechanisms such as carbon pricing aim to internalize externalities by putting a price on carbon emissions. However, determining the appropriate price for carbon and other externalities is not straightforward, as it requires taking into account multiple factors, such as the social and environmental costs, the technological feasibility, and the political feasibility of the policy. Moreover, the challenge of getting parties to agree on the internalization is also significant. Different stakeholders may have conflicting interests and preferences regarding the distribution of costs and benefits associated with internalizing externalities. For example, some industries may resist carbon pricing because it would increase their operating costs, while others may see it as an opportunity to innovate and compete. Finally, the effectiveness of policy solutions depends on the institutional and regulatory context, as well as the social and environmental context. The success of internalizing externalities relies on the capacity and the willingness of governments, businesses, and the civil society to collaborate and coordinate their actions. It also requires a supportive legal and institutional framework that promotes transparency, accountability, and participation. Now let's show you and introduce several solutions to the challenges that we may take.
Here are many cases from different governments or organizations that effectively handle those challenges. To address the complexities of identifying and measuring externalities, governments often employ a combination of data collection, stakeholder engagement, and adaptive management strategies. Take the Superfund program in the United States as an example. The U.S. Environmental Protection Agency used the hazardous ranking system, HRS, to quantify the risks posed by the hazardous waste sites, considering factors such as toxicity, migration potential, and human exposure. Sites with the highest HRS scores were prioritized for cleanup under the Superfund program. When it comes to assigning monetary value, the European Union chooses to use a market-based mechanism to assign monetary values to greenhouse gas emissions. They formulate a system called the European Union Emissions Trading System, EU ETS, which creates a market for pollution permits. The EU ETS covers energy-intensive sectors and sets a cap on the total emissions allowed from these sectors. Companies are required to hold permits for every ton of carbon dioxide they emit, and they can buy or sell permits as needed. The price of permits is determined by supply and demand in the market. Legislation is another effective way to internalize externalities. Sweden introduced a carbon tax in 1991. Since the implementation of the carbon tax, Sweden has experienced a significant decrease in carbon emissions. Between 1990 and 2019, Sweden's greenhouse gas emissions dropped by 32%. This reduction has been achieved alongside economic growth, with GDP increasing by 83% during the same period, demonstrating that it is possible to decouple emissions from economic development. An industry organization is likely to voluntarily set higher environmental and social standards. An example of that is the Forest Stewardship Council, FSC. The FSC certification process encourages businesses and landowners to engage in sustainable forest management practices. Companies that obtain the FSC certification can access new markets and customers who prioritize sustainable products. The FSC label also provides a competitive advantage and helps businesses demonstrate their commitment to responsible sourcing and sustainability. For instance, among the wood used in IKEA, the Swedish furniture retailer, 69% of it comes from the FSC-certified forests, which is consistent to IKEA's commitment to sustainability and responsible sourcing. Then welcome Jingyu to deliver the conclusion part for us.
Now let's come to the conclusion part. For the identification and measurement of the externalities, scholars and governmental organizations around the world have tried to solve the problem by using data collection, stakeholder participation, and adaptive measurement strategies. And the results of these attempts have proved that measuring externalities is relatively scientific. However, there are still some problems that cannot be solved during the measurement process. For example, the indicators involved in the measuring externalities are often partially unavailable, and the researchers may establish hypotheses and derive measurement results based on the lack of the data. And the deviation of hypotheses from actual situation may cause measurement errors. In addition to identifying and measuring externalities, we also need to think about who will bear the external cost in the process of internalizing externalities, and different groups will play games to protect their own interests. This all of our presentation. Thank you for listening.